Podcast 165. Every culture has a preface. ISBN 978-976-9702141. Every culture has a preface. ISBN 978-976-9702141. In an existing thought, it is presumed that since books, according to GNB.ca, are part and parcel of our daily lives, they impart knowledge of society, language, and history, and are strong transmitters of our identity and our culture. That said, then it is logical for me to presume that as an author, my preface is meant to draw you, the reader, in by offering information about my experience writing this book. The inspiration behind the subject matter, the writing process, the purpose of the story, and historical context for the material, according to masterclass.com. In light of this admission, I wish to submit that every culture has a preface. collinsdictionary.com defines that the noun of preface is an introduction to a book, especially one that explains the author's aims, compare foreword. This linguistic technique, preface, is preferred as opposed to foreword for the following reasons. A. Comports itself like an ideology. B. A coherent set of values. C. To some extent is based on a social and political reasoning. And D. The preface of this publication invariably tells you the genesis of this book. The stark difference between foreword and preface is that everything certainly has a value, including preface. Conversely, it is noted that synonyms for foreword is preface. Preface, in this context, is the predicate and an intrinsic part of every culture, which can be dissected for the purpose of examining its structure and the nature, uses, and functions of their several parts. Moreover, the knowledge of the culture of culture, according to ResearchGate.net. Given the dynamics and specifics of this theoretical thought, which exudes from my cognitive skill, is the presumption that implies that preface is an intrinsic part of every culture. Correspondingly, since the same is a part of the cognitive task, analysis allows me to be logical in assuming, in context, from a licensed cultural theoretician perspective, gives me evidence through research. This research certainly builds my confidence to the extent that what I tell you is credible, to submit that every culture has a preface. The foreword, through the comparative lens, according to Dave Chison, I quote, "The foreword and the preface serve very different purposes than the introduction and prologue," end quote. Robert Erie has argued that calculating how many books carry a preface, the answer is more complicated than you think. Figures range from 500,000 to 1 million books published annually. However, if you include self-published authors, you're looking at close to 4 million new book titles published each year, according to tonerbuzz.com. Tucker Max has stated that biographies often include prefaces. Biographers use prefaces to explain their research methods and approach to the book's subject. Then the rest of the book is all about the subject's life. Academic readers or specialists might care about the information, according to scribemedia.com. As I continue to navigate this journey, I discovered that it is very plausible that preface is a theory of cognitive development became part of my daily life as an author. The same gives me, as a writer, the opportunity to introduce myself to you, global citizens, especially those of you who read. To get a better handle on this topic, it was prudent that I juxtapose preface against a theory advanced by WritersDigest.com. Foreword is always a noun that refers to comments made before the actual text, usually in a book, and most commonly by someone who is not the author. What I have unearthed thus far: foreword can be a noun, adjective, verb, and adverb, dependent upon how it is used. But in this context, I have now written this preface, since it is my intention to tell you, the reader, how and why this book titled Every Culture has a preface. ISBN 978-976-9702141 originated in the first place. What is uniquely interesting in this research and discourse, when I employed this technique device, preface, in some ways it comports itself as an opportunity tool because it informs about my experiences during the writing of this text. In other fora, contextually, it is more personal than other types of academic writing because it allows me to explain to you, the reader, and why you should hear what I have to say. According to greenleafbookgroup.com, on this cultural stage, this presumption, every culture has a preface, provides scope for me to build credibility. By the same token, it also authorizes and qualifies me to give some insight into how I got to be competent and proficient on the subject culture. I must confess that this lived experience is a philosophized introduction to impart knowledge about society, language, and history, and are strong transmitters of our identity, according to GNB.ca and Barbados's culture, which is also part of the global culture. My presumption is part of this process and a continuum which captures and frames the subject matter, time period, and composition of the culture to tell my story and convey a message. This ethos has now become my way of life as an author and a licensed cultural practitioner who is a global citizen and who has another purpose to write this text on two counts. A, my pen name is DevGrow, which is a belief to take me forward. Dev means development and grow means growth. These two words combined produce a portmanteau, which is a literary device that encourages linguistic creativity. In this academic context, the point that must be underscored, there is a perception that the aforesaid values are standards or ideals with which we global citizens employ to evaluate actions, people, things, or situations according to philosophy.hku.hk. It should be noted that I have adopted this genre as my mantra, creating the genesis that influenced my inspiration to being an incessant author and who has embraced the indomitable spirit, according to Barbados.bb, as a philosophy because it analogizes my behavior, similar to the behavior of the waves of the sea. Therefore, that space that I now occupy in this cultural space give me confidence and not to mention ambition, which came about as a result of my intuition, dedication, and perseverance, which influenced my intellectual passion. Because this feat was a humbling experience and an achievement, I thought it noteworthy to share my publications and podcasts with you, the viewer, regardless of your cultural status and values, because it was my intention to inform you what drives my behavior and excite my intellectual passions, potentially, and change opinions or even encourage action, according to impactplus.com. In a historical context, my analysis of the aforesaid statement implies that I was smitten, and therefore, in an existing thought, I submit that every culture has a preface. Now that I established the ambience and the mood concerning this philosophized discourse, which analogizes my confidence and ambition, not only as an author, but licensed cultural practitioner, what I can state for the record, metaphorically, my behavior is comparable in characteristic ways of the sea, because the more that I practice my craft as an author, I never stopped writing, but I became an incessant author, according to vocabulary.com. For example, I have now written and published 296 e-publications, 45 are cultural novels, and 165 podcasts within the precincts of 1995 to 2023. I must confess that the fact that I have written so many e-publications, I deem it to be beneficial and some ways is considered invigorating. In closing, preface may be construed by some as a value and or standard or ideals with which global citizens employ to evaluate actions, people, things, or, according to philosophy.hku.hk, even situations. However, it should be noted that since in my introduction, I have advanced the view that every culture has a preface, ISBN 978-976-9702-141, it should be noted that I am also cognizant of the fact that Greenleaf Book Group claimed that a foreword is written by someone other than the author and tells the readers why they should read the book. Now that we are enlightened, and I have explained the stark difference between foreword and preface, and that everything certainly has a value, including preface, in climaxing as an author, cinematographer, media arts specialist, licensed cultural practitioner, podcaster, publisher, and doctoral student, all of the aforesaid reasons identified in this text inspired me to capture and frame every culture has a preface in 38 chapters in this publication, 296, and also ventilated the same in podcast 165 in ISBN 978-976-9702-141. All things being equal, every culture has a preface, is just an anthology which analogizes my confidence and ambition as an author and licensed cultural practitioner.